Hey everyone, this is Sean Deveney with Heavy Sports. I'm joined by our NBA insider, the esteemed Steve Bulpett. Steve, how are you this afternoon?
I'm living the dream.
As always, right? Speaking of living the dream, it was a dreamy night for Nets fans last night because you got a look at all three guys. You got a look at Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden on the floor together, which we haven't seen a lot of. And they look like a juggernaut. They scored 138 points against a very good Bulls team. Kyrie obviously is the X factor here. He's sort of the guy who's going to stir that drink. What is your outlook for them with Kyrie, and what are some of the, I guess, the danger spots that they'd have to look out for?
Well, I think Durant's the unguardable. As much as Kyrie and James Harden are ridiculously talented one-on-one players, Durant is still the unguardable entity out there. And when they're forcing teams, defenses to choose, then that's crazy. I think their issues are going to be perhaps some size when they come up against a really talented big. But they proved with their defense last night. I mean, that as much as you want to look at the scoring and how the offense clicked and how they got people going, it was their defense kicking in that really drove that machine. So, look, we're talking about three tech guys in Harden, Durant, and Kyrie, who no one has ever questioned their talent. It's does the chemistry work? I think that they're going to be really hard to beat, especially in a playoff situation where it becomes more of a possession game.
Yeah, I guess that the chemistry thing is an interesting thing to bring up because you covered Kyrie for the 2 years that he was in Boston. What was that like? I mean, there's sort of, I think, a narrative that's been said about that. What was your view of it?
In the words of John Lennon, strange days indeed. You remember the season, his last season prior to it, there was a season ticket holders event at the Garden where Kyrie comes out and says, I plan on re-signing next year if you'll have me. It's done. This is cool. We're set. We don't have to worry about this story all year. And then there came out something during the year that, maybe that wasn't the case anymore. And then there was a shoot around, the Celtics morning of the game shoot around at Madison Square Garden. Kyrie comes in, sits down on the opposite sideline to the benches, and some media would gather around him and ask him, hey, is this just some, BS speculation that's out there, or is there anything to this? Expecting that he was going to just, even if it wasn't untrue, even if it was true, that he would just push it aside because you got a season to play here. And he comes out with, ask me July 1st and all these things. It's like, whoa. And I remember walking away from that, and there were guys, on the floor, taking some shots. And I don't think I should say the player's name, but asked me, what did he say? And I told the player, he told me my life is going to be miserable for the rest of this season. and that Celtic player just rolled his eyes. So I think that as much as a lot of players like Kyrie as a guy and all that, there was, a lot of eye rolling. That was the year also that he kind of called out the young guys.
Right.
Kyrie is, to put it in the words of people who like him, a different dude.
Absolutely. I think that's been made clear, even more so in the last year or so. But for a coach, what do you think it was like for Brad? And if Brad were to give some advice to Steve Nash, what do you think it would be?
Run. No. Look, for everything you want to say about Kyrie Irving, and there's a lot to say, this man is one of the most talented basketball players I think any of us have ever seen. He's a small guy. His skill level is incredible. I mean, this guy can do like anything he wants to, pretty much. And I just think he's if you can separate the guy from the basketball talent, incredible. I would pay huge money to watch him play basketball. But it's also true, as I told him one time, hey, just so we're clear on this, I get paid to talk to you. I'm not here because but I think how he does is gonna, it's hard on a coach because you have to go with it. Okay, so you ask about Brad Stevens, what it was like for him. He saw all the weirdness. He saw the comments after games that would like get people thinking and perhaps cause a little bit of stir in a dressing room. But you had no choice but to play it out. And that year, that was the year again. I know we've talked about this before, where Kyrie kept saying after bad losses, "Hey, things will be fine. We'll be fine in the playoffs. I trust myself," and all this stuff. And then, as we mentioned again before, they get to the playoffs. They sweep Indiana playing beautiful basketball. They crush the Bucks in Milwaukee the first game, and then it all goes away. So you kind of got to ride it out. He's that good. You have to ride it out.
Yeah. Let's flip topics a little bit here. Again, I'm Sean Deveney with Heavy Sports here with Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider. On the flip side, there was the Bulls. And it's only 3 games. They've lost 2 out of their last 3. They had a beatdown of Detroit in between, a loss to Dallas and Brooklyn. They certainly do, though. I don't think you want to overreact or panic or anything, but they do look like a team that maybe has overachieved and is in for a little bit of a market correction here. As we're just a few weeks ahead of the trade deadline, Arturas Karnisovas, as we've seen, very busy at last year's trade deadline. Is this a team that needs a deal, do you think?
I think they could use a deal. Yeah. I mean, they've got the reason I think why they've done so well is they've got their hierarchy on the floor very well set. I mean, Demar Derozan, I think, is almost criminally underrated, if that's possible, for a guy that's been around that long, and has accomplished as much as he has. But, he and Zach LaVine have no issues working together, it appears. And you've got Vucevic, and I think the stuff they're working, you've got some young guys that are really good at getting after it. But again, some of those young guys, what's going to happen when they get into some pressure situations? So I could see very easily the Bulls making a move for a veteran guy that can come in and not only give the minutes you need on the floor, but be a stabilizing effect. So I'd keep an eye on that, I think.
Yeah, it seemed like Billy Donovan was almost saying that in his press conference after the loss. He was saying, he's pointing out how much experience Brooklyn has, and that his guys do not, even Zach LaVine, who's their all-star star scorer, hasn't really done a lot in terms of playoffs. And Vucevic has been to the first round, and that's it. So even their top level players really don't have that playoff experience. And he seemed to be saying it showed last night. Is that with a team like that? Have you seen in the past? Are there examples that you can think of where a veteran can come in and kind of change that and make that little bit of a change down the stretch?
I know there are examples, and I'm struggling to think of them. I remember as much as the Celtics were in a great position in 2007, 2008, bringing in PJ Brown was a real good move for them. I mean, they had their veteran leadership pretty well set, but having an extra player like that, who, again, his shot against Cleveland in the playoffs that year was, might have been the critical part to getting them through. But I didn't hear Billy Donovan's comments last night, but he's pretty smart for a guy that went to Providence. So yeah, I would go along with that. And I think that there will be a good amount of veterans available. I know the Celtics, certainly will make. I'm not sure these guys would necessarily help Chicago. They may, but Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, these guys should be available. And, others could be as well, from around the league. I would expect some movement as teams not only look to solidify what they want to do for the rest of this season, but also, work to get themselves into a more advantageous cap situation vis-a-vis the tax and all those issues.
Yeah, I think that one guy that they miss is Thad Young. Obviously, he was really good for them, really solid for them last year. They had to get rid of him in order to create the ability to sign Demar Derozan in that sign and trade to begin with. So that's a guy, man. That's the kind of guy I think they need to get back.
But even a guy like Javonte Green, who's been good for them, gives you that kind of defensive energy. And having guys like him, and he's a great kid. I'm not trying to talk about him as a world beater, but having a guy like that who's a bright kid, gifted athletically, but is comfortable with his role, isn't like, begging for the ball. Like where your offense is going to come from here. If we miss a shot, that's running a play for you. Or, but just a guy that's going to dig in and commit to defense like that. I think people like that are really good in less visible roles than the guys who put up the points. Having guys that are committed in those spots, hugely valuable.
I think Daniel Tice is a guy too who was briefly with Chicago. I'd expect the Rockets to make him very much available. He would be a guy who could give them a little bit of that toughness. Has had some playoff experience as well. So
Daniel's a weird case. I told him this when he was on the Celtics that my younger sister, Daniel Tice, was her favorite player. And he said, "Oh, thank you." And I said, "Well, we're trying to get her counseling." She'd gone from Parrish to Tim Duncan to Daniel Tice.
Well, there you go. No, but I think he'd be a good fit there. The Rockets, obviously, any veteran that you can get from Houston is going to be very, very much available. So something to look for there. Let's change topics again. I'm Sean Deveney from Heavy Sports. This is Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider, coming to you this afternoon, talking some NBA. One of the names that came up recently in an article as I was reading as a name that I hadn't really heard as a potential future Celtic. Turns out once in future Celtic, Jeff Green as a potential trade target for the Celtics. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me because I think he's played pretty well for Denver. He's on a veteran minimum deal. I don't think Denver's looking at their roster and saying, geez, we've got to get rid of this guy. He's the problem. But would be an odd acquisition, I think, for the Celtics. What did you make of that?
Not a whole lot. Jeff Green to me is an odd case. And he's, again, like you said, he's playing well in Denver. And I think, like you said, for all his contract situation, he's a guy that, why don't you keep unless he's part of a deal that gets you something, more prominent that you need for your rotation. But there's a guy that I think the fact that he hasn't been a multiple time All-Star, and I know that might sound crazy because, Jeff Green, who's Jeff Green? But when you watch the guy every night, you see his skill level, the talent this guy possesses, and the way there's nights where he just goes off. But then there's other nights where you've got to, move closer to the court, try to stand closer because you can't see him. Yeah. And he's like, I know he's there, but I can't see him. So I remember when he was with Boston, it's like we were talking to coaches then and saying, it would be nice if he at least give you a schedule of the games he's going to play. I mean, really play. But I think the world of his talent, and I can't for the life of me understand why it hasn't been there over the course of his career on a more consistent basis. You know, when the Celtics traded for him, the Kendrick Perkins thing with Oklahoma City. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of teams have traded him, because it's, again, I think they probably get frustrated because he's that damn good. Just a gifted player.
I remember they would be practically begging him to be more aggressive, and you know, they needed him to be more aggressive at that time, and he just wasn't there. It'd show up and you'd get this 30-point game, and then you get 7 the next night. Yeah,
crazy. But you know, what's the line the coaches say? You are what you do consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I think that at some point, if Jeff Green has a measure of self-examination, you know, 5 years after he retires, he's going to look back and realize, damn, you know, I could have been a major star. And hey, he's done well for himself. He's been in some good situations. He's had a long career. I mean, how many guys come into the NBA and have that long a career? But I think we both kind of agree that it probably should have been, a tad more.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does bring up a point, I think, about the Celtics, and that is, they've got these 2 big traded player exceptions. I think they have 3 altogether. They can use them in the summer, the way that it works. For, as you mentioned, for people who don't study the CBA, it basically allows you to trade a player for nothing. Essentially, it's a placeholder.
Yeah, back to same money.
So, but the Celtics could use those. Thing is, if they use them, they're going to put themselves deep into the luxury tax. Where they are right now, they're just over the line. They could trade away. Hernan Gomez is a guy who frequently mentioned. They could trade away somebody like that, get themselves under the line, and not have to have all the penalties that come with the luxury tax. Or they could be more aggressive and say, if obviously this season doesn't look like it's shaping up to be a championship season, but if they could bring back a young guy who might be somebody who they could build around, or could be a piece that they use in the future, would you expect Wick and that ownership group, would you expect them to be willing to go into the tax for that? Or are they going to look at it and say, this is not a championship season. We paid the tax in the past when we've been a championship type team. We're not going to be that this year, so we're not going to pay that tax.
Sean, I think that what you want to avoid as a team for your overall financial health is the repeater tax.
Yeah,
that being it's a 3 out of 4 years. I shouldn't say if I'm not exactly sure, but and I should know that. I apologize. You want to avoid that. But I think the question you just asked will be better asked in a couple of weeks. As say a week out from the trade deadline is when that question needs to be answered, because you've seen the Celtics be wildly inconsistent. Again, not just from game to game, but from quarter to quarter. You dismantle the Phoenix Suns. You are up huge on Milwaukee in Milwaukee, and you lose that game. You beat the Suns, but you lose the Milwaukee game unconscionably. So now that they have their team basically together, and it looks like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are coming out publicly and saying, hey, we need to be better together. We need to find ways to make each other better. You've got to give them a couple of weeks at least here, a few weeks, to see if they can make this work. And I think then you ask that question, is this worth, going in for this rest of the season? Or, hey, look, it just ain't here, and you take a step back. But with regard to the TPEs, I think you're looking most likely at off season where there will be more options. And right now there's a lot of teams are we in it still or aren't we? And they've got to decide that. And some of them will make the wrong decision because they, for the Celtics and for the teams that are used to, and whose fan bases are used to them being at the top, it's like either can you win it or can't you? But for a lot of places, or for many, it's, hey, are you a playoff team or not? And that's something that other clubs will push in for to make it to that level, not understanding perhaps that in the long run that puts you in NBA Middle Earth, which is the worst place to be.
Right. Perpetual 44-win seasons, right. And I think one thing that gets lost about that luxury tax thing is it's not just the money that you're paying out. It's also you then lose the money that you'll have coming in. If you look at payrolls for Brooklyn, for Golden State, for the Lakers, there's going to be, I think it's something like $12 or $13 million that teams under that tax are going to they're going to get a check for $12 million. I know these are multi-billion-dollar teams, their valuations, but you still have year-over-year revenue and operating costs and all that stuff. You get a check for $12 million. It makes a lot of things a lot better, even if it doesn't necessarily help out in terms of the team.
Yeah, Sean. Look, I hate to bring this up, but I told you this a long time ago. We should have bought our own team. What the hell are you thinking? Yeah, and look, NBA finance is a weird thing that I don't think fans give a damn about. But when the salary cap came in, it not only they sold it as like a competitive situation, but this is business. This is entirely business for a lot of these people, or business has got to be uppermost in their thinking. What the salary cap did, what the revenue sharing plan that the NBA has, the percentage going to the players, the percentage staying with the teams, define gross revenues, which is really the term that people need to get, understand about. It's like this before your golf match, deciding how the strokes are going to go. You decide the winners sometimes, before you even get on to the first tee. But what the NBA owners were seeking is cost certainty. Okay, so yeah, those checks coming in are nice, but what's more important is knowing what revenues are coming in via TV, ticket sales, etc. But having that cost certainty for what you got to spend allows you to take your revenue, invest it, roll it over within banks and things like that, and that's where the financial stability comes in for these franchises. And then, when you get teams that are doing well, Milwaukee, a quote unquote small market team, they get to push for it last year. They get to, maybe spend beyond what their accountant says, hey, maybe this, but you get to go for it. And because you have the cost certainty and you have your other years where you can be doing things the right way.
Well, that was all I had for you, Steve. Thanks for your time, and thanks everyone out there for watching. And we'll be back soon with more NBA talk.